All right, so the next assignment that we have is this little stick animation thing, and the file for it is on Canvas. It's called Your Stick Animation, and you'll just download the file and put it into your folder. Wonderful. So I'm just going to extract this to my folder. RenderMan 25 or 21 is now on the computers. 1 second, though, I can't do two things at once apparently. 40, 17. There we go. So then you can start using the newest RenderMan here, and then the same thing for your home computer. Okay. So now you'd obviously just replace this with your last name, animated stick. Okay. So go to Canvas real quick. Download that file, put it into your folder, and rename it. Alright, remember, once you have it copied in there, once you've renamed it, make sure you set your project before opening it up. So this is the stick animation. So the idea with the stick rig, okay, is kind of very similar to the other one that you guys just worked with. In this one, though, if you tried to click on any of these items, you'll see that you cannot click on anything except for the green arrows, okay? The green arrows are rigged. They control everything else. So on the rest of it, on the mech piece, you could grab like the castle and just move it off to the side, and it would be moved off to the side forever. With the arrows here, you can move the arrows, but you can only move them in the direction I want you to move them. Okay? So as we get into like rigging things, this is eventually what you want to do. You want to make something that is idiot proof, because the riggers basically think that animators are idiots and they don't want them to break stuff. Not really, but sort of kind of. Okay, same thing with these. I can't move these. You'll see that these have these little like loopies, and that means I could just rotate. And I can only rotate in the one direction, like this, okay? So in a very nice way, this has been organized for you. It does take me a little bit of time to do that. As we get further on, like the next assignment, the bouncing ball, you'll have no rig, and you'll have to manually or mentally kind of lock in what you want to do without accidentally moving it in the wrong direction or scaling it weird or doing something you shouldn't be doing. Okay? So what we want to do here is we want to animate this this thing going to this bullet point here and then coming back. Okay? Now in the process of this thing going here and then coming back, what should all this stuff on the bottom be doing? Right, kind of swaying behind it, right? There should be some delay to it, right? Now, if we look at the dynamics of this, when this thing moves, which one of these legs is the first one to move? This one, right? Because the weight should carry downward, all right? Same thing if this was upside down. Just pretend for a second. There we go. So if this was like this, and then all of a sudden it went that way, that same one that's closest to where the source moves would move first, okay? Now the way that we're going to do this is that we're actually going to be animating this all together. Well, not the top part, but the rest of it. We're going to animate all those other pieces together, and then we're just going to use the tracks editor just like we did before to offset them, okay? That's the easiest way to do it. Whoopsie, get back to where I was. All right. So now before, how did we set keyframes?
We selected the one with the channel box. Okay.
We right-clicked, and then we went to key selected, okay? Because we only have one item over there in the channel box, we can just hit S, and that will automatically animate that one item, okay? So, oops, I didn't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at frame 1. So So make sure your ticker is at, you can't see it on mine, but it's at frame 1. Okay, make sure you have the arrow selected, and then you're going to hit S. S for set key. Okay, so make sure you have the top arrow selected, you're on frame 1, and you hit S. Okay, and then you should see what next to translate X?
Red.
Red, okay, meaning that we have a keyframe and we're on that keyframe. So how far up should we go? We don't know. Maybe we'll go to 70. Nope, let's go to 60. Okay, so we'll go up to 60 and we'll just slide it over to where the locator is. Okay, so you may have to zoom out a little bit, obviously, and scoot it over there. It doesn't have to be perfectly right on the locator. You just want to get it close to that locator. Okay, so we're on the locator. We hit S again. It turns red. No big deal. Now what we want to do is we want to hang out for a second. What we don't want to do is it just goes there and then comes right back, because that'll look kind of weird. So we want it to go there, maybe stop for a second or a couple frames, and then come back. So maybe we go up to 65, and then we say S again. Okay, there's no movement. It's just a matter of it staying in the same spot for 5 frames. Then we'll go to 120, and we'll take it back off the frame. Okay, so we'll put it back like way, not too far away, but like past the little grid thing on the ground. Okay, so I went to 1, he's on the left side of the grid, 60 he's there, 65 he's there, and 120-ish he's there. Okay, now these in this sense are all poses. We're basically just saying here's where you're going to be, here's where you're going to be, and now here's where you're going to be. So if we were to hit play, we get that. Now how do we get to slow down if it goes like crazy quick? Who remembers? Was that? Mm-hmm.
With the timeline and then set the playback speed to play every frame.
Play every frame max real time or real time. Either one of these would work. Okay. Now what's typically you want to do is make sure it's on play every frame. That way you actually see every frame. Sometimes what will happen is if you do play real time, it'll jump frames. You just right click on the timeline, playback speed, and then play every frame max real time. So now, okay, so this looks horrible already. So what should we have this thing do to make it more exciting?
Speed up and slow down.
Speed up and slow down. Where should it start, or where should it be slowest?
At the start.
At the start of each movement, right? Okay, so where do we do that at?
Frame 1 into last frame.
No, what was that?
Frame 1 into last frame.
Right, but where do we do that as far as what tool do we use? Graph editor? Yes, someone said it. So window, animation editor, graph editor. Okay, window, animation editors, graph editor. And then we have our graph editor. And then how do we see our graph? F. Boom. Okay, so now we can see our graph. So if we look at it, what's happening is it is slowing down here. Okay, it does start off kind of slow, and then it picks up speed, and then it slows down again. So it is kind of doing that, but what we want to do is really push that it's doing that. We really want to tell it like, hey, I want super slow and then some acceleration, then boom. Eventually it has to slow down right before it hits, otherwise that would look odd. Okay, so what we need to do is I'm going to marquee this graph. Okay, just marquee right down the middle of one of the lines. And you'll see that these have handlebars. Click on your arrows, that's why you don't have them showing up.
My graph's so weird, or I didn't press it.
All right, so don't mess with your graph yet, but I just want to show you why we're going to do the next step. So if this was Illustrator or Photoshop or InDesign, and we had the pen tool like these handlebars, we could very easily just grab them and stretch them out. And in here we can do that, but not by default. Okay, so if I click on one of these If I click on one of these handlebars and then I use the middle mouse and try to move it, you see that it doesn't move. It's kind of like a stupid thing that they have. So what we have to do is we have to go under curves, and we have to tell our curves that they're weighted. Okay? So go grab your curve and then go to curves, weighted tangents. There's actually 2 steps. That's first step. So go to curves, weighted tangents. Your handlebars should then turn like hollow squares. And then under tangents, you're going to go to free tangent weight.
What was that last one?
Tangents, free tangent weight. Okay, so curves, weighted tangents is the first one. And then tangents, free tangent weight. So here's how we test if this works. Now you have to get used to using this method of doing it because it's definitely going to throw you. So when you're in here and you're trying to move something, what tool should you be in? The move tool. Okay? Anytime you want to move something, make sure you're in the move tool. All right? So if I want to grab this handlebar and move it, I'm going to marquee it. Now here's what sucks about the graph editor and spend like maybe 3 versions, is that sometimes if you just marquee near a handlebar, it'll just move it like this. Like I'm nowhere, like I'm obviously near it, but it just moves it. So what we have to do is we have to marquee the point, marquee the handlebar. So this is all left mouse button marqueeing. And then we use the middle mouse, this is the sucky part because people forget it, use the middle mouse button to stretch that out.
Why not just the left mouse?
Because sometimes the left doesn't work. I don't know why.
Oh, no.
The middle always works. Okay. So that's what we want to do. We want to marquee it once to highlight the handlebars, marquee the handlebar, and then middle mouse button to move that handlebar over. Okay, not crazy, but just like more than it was. And obviously we want to do this like on both sides. Every time it starts moving, we want to stretch that out so that it has a little bit more oomph to its acceleration. So it basically starts off really slow and then goes woo, and here too. Okay, so that's what your graph should sort of kind of look like. All right, so now I'm going to take a look at my animation and see if it's any better. Okay, so it's a little bit better on mine. I could probably tweak it a little bit more. So one thing I can do is, we did this side, right? So we drug this side over. If we drag it too extreme, what could happen is basically it sits there for a whole bunch of frames, and then in one frame it just jumps over, or 2 frames it jumps over and it looks ridiculous. So you have to find the sweet spot of it working correctly. Sometimes it's going to be adjusting stuff in here. Sometimes it's going to be going to the dope sheet or moving the keyframes side to side. So in this, I'm going to try this. I'm going to grab these keyframes here and just hold shift and middle drag it that way. Okay. Now before I go too far, you can see I can't do it. Like it's just stopping. Okay. So what I have to do is I have to break the tangents. So one of these buttons up here, this one that has the broken elbow, if I click on that, it'll break the tangents, allowing me to manually kind of squish that one in. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I don't need to break the tangents for that one though.
Wait, how do you shift and...
Shift and then middle drag, and that just makes sure that your line goes straight, so you're not like dipping down. Oops. All right, so mine's still going pretty boringly, but we're gonna leave it for now, okay? Because I want to make sure there's enough room for my other stuff to happen. For this assignment, you're actually going to like redo the stuff, so you're not going to just do what we're doing in class, because I want you to do this again so that it reinforces these things, because just like the dope sheet, the graph editor is going to be around for the long haul. Cool. Okay. So now that that's set, now what we need to do is we need to animate the other thing. So I'm just going to close my graph editor. And I'm just going to grab these arrows, these curvy arrows. Okay. Now I want to grab them in a specific order, so I don't just marquee them. Really doesn't matter, but I just want to grab them in a certain order. So I grab the top one first, and then hold Shift and go to the next one, then hold Shift, go to the next one, and next one, each time holding Shift. Okay. So you don't need the very top left and right arrow, you just need the rounded arrows. Because those are the only ones we're setting keyframes on right now.
Yeah, mine's being
It's on that. So the first item that we select is always going to be green until we select something else. Then the last one we selected is green, see? So as we do this, it's showing the other ones in white and showing this one in green. Okay, or whatever color that other green is. Okay, now we know that we have more than one item selected because if you look over here in the channel box, it says ... Doesn't tell us how many items we have, but it says arm5_control ... So we have more than one item selected. So now we're on frame 1, so we just rewound it to frame 1, and then we can hit S. Okay. And then we should get our keyframe for frame 1. Okay. Did yours work? Yeah, it did. Keyframe just start working again. Okay. So at frame 1, the rotates are 0. There's no movement there. If we click and drag up a little bit, you'll see how we get just a little bit of movement in here from this point to like that point. Okay, so what I like to do is maybe just add a little bit of rotation here just so that there's a little bit of movement on it, not crazy. So I'm going to just rotate it back. So I just switch to rotate, which is E, and rotate it back just slightly, just a little bit. Yeah, just a smidge. So I'm at frame like 25. I rotate them just a smidge, and then I hit S to set a key. Okay. If you go too much, it's going to look weird because what's going to happen is it goes like super slow, but then the tail is like flipping up. Okay. You also have to keep in mind that the every single one of these tail pieces is actually connected. So as I rotate it, look at what happens when I just rotate this. They're all going to start curling up. Okay. So just the slightest movement does a huge amount to this. Okay. So that's perfect. Actually, that's probably too much. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to just keep dragging until I get to a point where he stops, which on mine it's 60. And then I'm going to set a key. Okay? So I'm going to drag in my timeline until he stops moving, and then just set a key.
Why is this inanimate object?
Is gender assumption?
Did I even say he?
See the long dangly thing?
Question answered.
Okay, then we're going to go to 65. So that's where it starts moving again, and I'm going to flip it to the other side. Okay. Hold on a second. Give me a minute. Oh, sorry. Go back to 60. That's right. Sorry. That's where we want the tail to be up higher. That's what we wanted. That's what I missed. The tail should be back further, obviously, because now he's going faster, so the tail should be up further. I'm going to blame that on you guys. Okay, and then at 65, that was correct. Now he'll be the other way.
Do we have to rekey it, or do we just...
You can just set a key on top of it, and it'll overwrite it.
Sean, you gotta
Okay.
choose. It's either a tail or it's a E.
No, it's a tail.
You just use them all open the can of beans.
Right. So now if we look at our animation, it goes like that. Okay. And then if we go to, let's say 85 or so, the tail is probably going to be flopped down a little bit. Okay, because it's actually like it hit and then it swings up and now it's coming back to rest because the item or the platform is kind of coming to rest. And then I'll go to 120 and then I'll pull it back up. Okay.
85 is from there.
Yep, 85. We have a nice little like sag in it, so it goes whoop, whoop, and then there it goes again.
Can I see the side stationary?
Right there.
Okay.
I probably went too far. I probably lowered it back a little bit more. And then 120 is just like really far up.
Okay. Wait, in the same direction.
Yep. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Woo. And it goes back up. Okay, so it's nothing too fantastic right now. Like I said again, when you do the second one, you can spend more time kind of finessing it. But I just wanted to go over the bullet points of it. Cool. So the next thing that we want to do is we then want to offset it. Because what's happening is, as the top moves, all the ones underneath are automatically just rotating up. So what we have to do is we'll use the dope sheet to offset each one. So now if we go to the animation dope sheet.
You said go to the dope sheet, Sean.
Yep, window animation editors dope sheet.
Pretty dope.
It's pretty dope. Okay. Now this is why I selected these in the order I selected them, because the dope sheet displays them in the order that I selected them. So 1, which is on top, should be the first one to go, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. So I'm going to watch me do mine. So I'm just going to grab 2 through 5. So I just go 2 through 5. And I middle click and I just drag it over a couple frames. I go through 3 through 4 or 5. Drag it over a couple frames. 4 and 5, drag it over a couple frames. Again, I'm using the middle mouse button with the move tool to do that. Okay, so you should have this like stair-steppy type thing. So you can see just this minor tweak on this has really made this thing have another life to itself. Like, it actually feels like that dangling item has some weight now because of how it's moving, because all the pieces are not moving in the same amount. Now the other thing that wouldn't happen in the real world is that each piece would move the exact same amount, right? So right now every single one of these is rotating the exact same amount, and I guess psychologically we know that, but maybe like our eyes don't know that, so we can adjust it. Okay, so this is perfect. This is exactly what we want. It's always good to practice with this too. Like maybe I went 2 frames here, but what if I did 1 frame? Right? What would 1 frame look like between each one of these? Looks a bit more rigid, right? So this same exact technique we could actually use for doing 1 if this was supposed to be like a whip or an antenna. So if I grabbed an antenna and I pulled it back and I let go, we would get more of that like flinging effect than kind of this like willowed reed type thing. Same thing if we went further, right? So if I went maybe 3 over, we would get like pasta noodle, I think.
Oh, cute.
Yep. Okay, and then you could obviously go further and further. Eventually what happens is you hit this point though that stuff starts looking weird. Like it moves this way, but one of the things kicks up that way or the opposite, okay? So you have to be aware that there is a spot where this would just look stupid. Now you can actually change the distance between those two to again give it some kind of different life. So maybe like the first two, because they're already close to the top, maybe those ones would move actually like closer like this, okay? And maybe 3 would be here, so it's like 2 keyframes apart. But then 4 and 5 are actually further keyframes apart. So just those little things help add to your realism to kind of give your piece a different look than just the regular. So now basically like this piece, those look a little bit more noodly, where the top pieces look a little bit more rigid, okay?
Did you just make up a word?
Noodly is a word.
Word down.
It is a word now. I've copywritten it. You can't use it. All right, so now we want to change the amount that each one's rotating, so that's where we go to the graph editor. Typically, anytime I change keyframe location, I go to the dope sheet. So if I'm just changing timing of things, I'll go to the dope sheet. If I need to change values, I go to the graph editor. So in this case, I'm changing values for these things. Now it helps in this case to make this huge, so I'm just going to full screen this. There we go. Okay, so by looking at our graph, you can see that we have 5 keyframes in each spot that are exactly at the same position, right? So each one of these keyframes is exactly at the same value. So if I looked at mine, they're all at negative 2.364. That's what that number means. And I know that the far left one is which one of my dangling things? The top one, right? The very top one, because that one's the one that moves first. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So like we said before, the top one would probably move the most, and the bottom one would probably move the least. So if I click on this, hold shift, and then middle click and drag, I can bring this up. So what I'm going to do is just give these a little bit of an offset. Nothing crazy, especially for this one, because it's just a slight movement. And just give it a little bit of an offset. And then I'll go to the next one and do the same thing. I'm just going to hold shift and move each one just kind of closer to the center line, okay? This 0 line here is the center line, so regardless of where I'm at, I'm grabbing the second one and pushing it closer to it, the next one pushing it closer. All right, so here's some other things that we can kind of keep our eye out for while we're kind of looking at this. That definitely adds something subtle to the mix. I mean, it's not a huge difference. When you get into bigger things, you'll find that a lot of these little changes that we do make a huge impact on the end quality of it, okay? So some things to keep in mind, that here at the very beginning, basically I'm at this point at the start where nothing's rotated, and then I'm doing a negative rotation on this. Now as I move mine up, you see that light gray line? Some of mine went over, their curve goes over that gray line. And so what that means is that they're actually going a little bit positive, so that before they start moving, they're actually rotating forward just slightly. Now because that value was just like, if you look at the number here, it's like 1/2 of a degree or 3/4 of a degree, you don't really notice it. If I were to zoom in on that, and that's, I think, probably the bottom one. It's probably about frame 24 or so, yeah. So it's probably about here. It's barely recognizable, but there is kind of like a tiny little bit of a kick to the one side. In this case, it's not a huge deal. But just so you get the idea of what could happen with this, if I went crazy with this, this is essentially what it's doing. Is it's rotating too far that way. So this definitely would look weird. Here's our animation, and for some reason this one turns that way before it goes that way, right? So sometimes you have to come in here to these handlebars and kind of tweak them a little bit too. Oops. So don't be afraid to get in there and start playing with the handlebars even further, just to make sure that the animation is lining up the way you want it to. Even with what we did before, like this area right here goes pretty quick. There's sometimes when that animation might not sync up with the movement of the stick itself. So what happens sometimes is that the stick moves super quick, and then the bending part is kind of slow, and then right at the end it goes whoosh and kicks up. So sometimes you have to move keyframes. Sometimes you have to grab the handlebars. Can't grab all of them at the same time. I grabbed 3 of them. That's pretty impressive. That's not going to work. It did work. Holy cow. Did it? Not really. It worked the wrong way. I want that. Alright, so in some cases you may have to go in here just like we did before and start to tweak these graphs so that you get the same kind of thing that we did in the other one. So that it's very, very flat here, so it goes super slow, and then it drops off. Anytime I do any big changes like that, I always go back to the dope sheet and I just reset all of my stuff. Okay? This is probably the easiest way to realign your things, right? So we can just go boop, there, there, and there. And what that does is it just lines up all those keyframes back together again. So now when I come in here, do you see how easy it is just to grab all these and move them around? So if I needed to change the speed of something, I could just grab this and just change the speed of it. Okay? If I needed to, you know, whatever. You pull that in like this. I'll just go, let's just go crazy on that. Just see what happens. Okay? And then again, really quick. You can see how just getting comfortable with just back and forth between these two. Essential. Alright, so I'm going to rewind it. I'm going to hit play. So you can see he like goes like way too far up. Obviously this is a positional thing, or a rotational thing, but it does happen sometimes that your stuff just doesn't sync up together, especially when we're trying to animate this item going this way and this item flinging up. You have to play that game. So put everything back the way it was there, put these back to like that. Cool. Reset these. Boop. Four. Will 4 be good? Ding dong. Alright. Not what you know back there. Alright. So that's our animation. Okay, so you're going to basically save this one as something else, use it as reference if you need to, and make a better animation that's maybe a little bit more interesting. So by interesting, you could have it go back and forth. So you could have it like go to the mark, come back, and then go back to the mark if you want, and then come back. Ideally, what I want is it to be off screen at the start and off screen at the beginning of this. Okay? So when we are here and we're showing our camera, we don't see it at all. It just kind of like zips into the frame, and then it would zip out of the frame. So if you have it go back and forth, that's what I'd want it to do. Now a couple things just about RenderMan stuff real quick. You can't grab any of this stuff, right? So you have to assign materials to it. Inside the layers on the right, you'll see it says VP by controls, and it says VPR by guides, and it says VPR by geometry. So the V's are visibility, okay? So click the eyeballs off, the visibility goes away. The P's, I forget what they are, just ignore them. And then the R is reference. So if you click the R off, now you can grab the geometry. So you don't want to do that until you're like ready to start texturing your stuff, because it's very simple to go, oh, I want to move this, and you go, and then you've just ruined everything. There, you just ruined everything. Okay, so we don't want to do that. Now, when you do your texturing stuff, here's a bonus tool, especially because this is a animation class. If you click on this thing inside RenderMan, these are presets. So if you're like, I just want some basic colors like ceramic, I can just import and assign it to that background. And the same thing here, I can just go, make these colors interesting, obviously, and make sure they work. I'll talk more about that next class. Not you. Like, you might say, oh, it would be cool to see this in glass. Glass isn't going to read. These items are too thin to read as glass. So I would avoid that for sure. And then liquid, if I choose something like liquid, it doesn't look like a liquid, so it's not going to look like a liquid, right? It's going to look like a glass shape. Paint, there we go. Just the paint ones are pretty good. So I'm going to go with blue, import and assign. That's cool. And then I'm going to grab these pieces. And I'll go with that color, import and assign. Cool. And this piece will just be I'll just assign that. And then I can come into here and change it. Now this is with RenderMan 21, there's only one shader. So if you want to assign your own shaders, there's only one major one we would use, which is this Pixar surface. And it has all the options right in there. For what we're doing, we just need to basically just go in there and pick a color. Okay? And then maybe adjust the specularity of it. All right, so that's as simple as it gets. The background, I probably need to take the specularity down on it. I believe it's probably up way too high. This probably has a clear coat. Yes, it does. Take the roughness up. Okay, roughness will blur out your reflections, which is what I want on the background. No anything drastic on there. Cool. Also inside the presets is lighting. So you can just go in here and right-click and import a lighting rig. And now you have a lighting rig. Now this one's actually super tiny for the scene. So I'm going to grab all three lights, Control G to group them, and then scale them up really big. There we go. And then that one got out of the mix. Just rotate it. Cool. And then obviously we do test renders. We look at it and we say, what looks good, what doesn't look good. Gorgeous. Cool. All right, so just a brief little thing about that before I let you off to work on your stuff. Okay, so save this as, open up the original file again. If you have to download it again, and then remake it, but make it cooler. Okay, no requirements on time, so if you want to make this longer, that's fine. If you want to make it faster, that's fine, as long as it looks good and interesting. You could do multiple ones too. I've had people do, in the past, they've done different iterations. Here's the noodly one that comes in and it's all like floppy. And then here's the stiffer one that comes in. And then here's another one that comes in, kind of showing different iterations of the same kind of techniques. If you want to duplicate it, you just would import. So you just go to File, Import, and you'd be able to import a brand new one of these back into it. Stick rig, yes. You just have to delete the background. So I'd have to go to my outliner, find my second background and delete it, grab the new stick rig stuff, oops, Control G to group it all, and then move it over. And then I would have two. He doesn't do anything though. It's deadbeat brother. All right, cool.